The galaxy was old and full of wonders. Hundreds of races lived among the stars, each proud of its own history. Great empires rose and fell, leaving behind ruins, stories, and lessons. But among all those names, one word still floated like a ghost in forgotten records: humans. Some called them the lost race. Others said they never existed at all. Ancient texts described them as reckless explorers, fierce in battle but gentle at heart. Yet not a single planet claimed to have seen one in over 10,000 cycles. Their cities were gone, their homeworld erased from every chart. To most, humans were just myths, stories told to amuse children or to warn explorers about pride and ambition. Lyra Tisan, a young historian from the proud Aelorian Empire, never believed such tales. She was logical, curious, and confident in science, not superstition. The Aelorians were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and shining eyes that glowed faintly in dim light. Their civilization was built on knowledge, reason, and patience. Lyra spent her life studying lost species. She traveled across forgotten worlds, scanning ruins and decoding languages long dead. But whenever she came across references to humans, she always laughed. Fairy tales, she would say. A race that fought gods and shaped galaxies? Impossible. Her current assignment brought her to Outpost SAR-9, a lonely mining planet far beyond the main trade routes. The surface was rough and gray, covered with dust storms and broken rock. Under a protective dome stood a small research base surrounded by drilling machines and lights that blinked weakly under the dull sun. Lyra and her small team of scientists were there to study strange metallic ruins recently uncovered by miners. The structure was buried deep beneath the crust, and the few markings found on its outer walls did not match any known language. "It's probably pre-Aelorian," said Rilak, her assistant, a soft-spoken alien with silver scales and round golden eyes. He had served with Lyra for years and admired her knowledge. "But these symbols look different, like they were made by hands, not tools." Lyra smiled. "Interesting observation, Rilak. Maybe it's an old colony ruin. We'll find out soon enough." For days, the team scanned and mapped the underground site. The deeper they went, the stranger things became. The walls were smooth, metallic, and lined with small panels that still gave off weak power readings. Whatever civilization had built this place, they had mastered technology far beyond modern understanding. One evening, Lyra sat in her tent, going through the scans. A small blinking mark appeared on her tablet, a faint signal repeating over and over again. She tapped it and a line of text appeared. UNSC, Earth Command. Sector record 14B, status, sleep protocol active. She frowned. UNSC, she murmured. The term meant nothing in any Aelorian record. She searched through the archives, but there was no match. Rilak entered, carrying a tray of steaming blue tea. "Still working, Lyra?" She nodded without looking up. "Have you ever heard of Earth Command?" Rilak tilted his head. "Earth? That word appears in ancient myth files. It was said to be the homeworld of humans." Lyra laughed softly. "Of course. The famous humans again." "I should have known," Rilak smiled. "Maybe they left this behind." "Don't be silly," Lyra said, though she felt a small spark of curiosity. "No trace of humans has ever been proven. Not one artifact confirmed. If they existed, their history is lost forever." Still, she couldn't ignore the strange signal. It pulsed like a heartbeat. The next day, Lyra led her team to the lowest part of the ruin, following the energy readings. They reached a massive sealed door made of dark alloy. Strange lines were carved into it, not like decoration, but like a pattern for energy flow. The door had a circular emblem engraved at its center, a blue planet surrounded by white stars. Lyra ran her fingers over the symbol. "Beautiful design," she whispered. Rilak's scanner beeped. "There's a power source inside. Still active." Before Lyra could respond, the ground beneath them vibrated. The walls began to hum and faint light moved along the carvings. Dust floated into the air. "What's happening?" Rilak shouted. Lyra stepped back. "I didn't touch anything." The door glowed brighter and brighter until the entire chamber filled with light. A deep mechanical voice echoed softly through the air, speaking in a language Lyra's translator couldn't recognize. Then the massive door split open with a low hiss, revealing a dark chamber beyond. Inside stood a single metal pod, tall and sealed. Frost covered its surface and cables ran from its base into the floor. On the front was the same emblem, the blue planet. Lyra approached slowly. Her heart pounded. She brushed away the frost from a small window and froze. Inside, through the glass, she saw the outline of a humanoid figure. "By the stars," she whispered. "It's alive." Relak's eyes widened. "Alive after all this time?" The instruments went wild. Heat levels rose. Power surged. The pod began to hum louder. A panel lit up with words none of them could read, then switched to a simple message that the translator barely managed to decode. Cryosleep termination complete. Opening sequence initiated. Lyra and Relak stepped back as the pod released a burst of steam. Slowly, the front opened. A figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing thick ancient armor coated with dust and scratches. The armor was dark gray with a faint blue light shining at the chest. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the figure moved. He raised his head, his helmet retracting with a soft click. Beneath it was a human face, quite tired, weathered, but alive. His eyes opened slowly, sharp and full of awareness. Lyra's breath caught. He looked around confused, then focused on her. His voice was hoarse but steady. "How long have I been out?" Lyra stared, unable to answer. Relak whispered, "Lyra, is that—" The man looked at his surroundings, then down at the strange symbols on the floor. "This isn't Earth," he muttered. "Not even close." Finally, Lyra found her voice. "Who are you?" she asked carefully. He stood tall, straightening his back as if remembering an old habit. "Captain Elias Ward, Terran Defense Forces." "United Nations Space Command," Lyra blinked. "The same words from the pod." "UNSC," she whispered. "Earth Command." Elias nodded slowly. "Then the mission failed, and I was frozen." He looked at her again, eyes narrowing slightly as if studying her features. "You're not human." "No," she said softly. "I'm Aelorian, and you are supposed to be a myth." The captain gave a faint smile. "A myth, huh? Guess I missed a lot." Lyra stepped closer, curiosity overpowering her fear. "Humans vanished thousands of cycles ago. How are you still alive?" Elias touched his chest plate, watching the faint blue glow. "Cryosleep pod kept me alive. We were exploring the frontier during the War of Silence. Something went wrong. After that, nothing." Lyra exchanged glances with Relak. "The War of Silence is a legend too," she said softly. "If that was real, everything we thought we knew is wrong." The captain's eyes darkened with memory. It was real. Too real. Silence filled the chamber. The lights flickered softly and dust drifted in the air like ghosts of the past. Lyra finally said, "Captain Elias Ward, welcome back to the galaxy." He looked around at the ruins, his face thoughtful. "The galaxy," he repeated. "I wonder what's left of it." Outside, the storm winds of Sarn 9 blew across the gray plains, whispering through the domes. The myths of humanity, long dismissed and forgotten, had just walked out of legend, breathing, speaking, and standing before them. And for the first time in her life, Lyra Tisan, who never believed in old stories, began to realize that the myths were never myths at all. The quiet hum of the research base filled the air. Lyra sat in her quarters, staring at the human, Captain Elias Ward, through the glass window. He sat calmly in the next room, drinking a cup of mineral water Relak had offered him. It had been only 3 hours since the discovery, but the entire world of Lyra Tisan had changed. The myths she had once mocked were now sitting across from her, breathing, speaking, and alive. Her fingers trembled slightly as she took notes. The instruments had confirmed it. His biology matched the lost genetic records described in the oldest archives. He was human, without question. Relak entered quietly. "You haven't slept," he said softly. Lyra smiled faintly. "How can I?" "He's a living myth, Relak. This changes everything." The assistant nodded. "He said he wanted to talk to you." Lyra hesitated. Part of her was eager to ask him 1,000 questions, and part of her feared the answers. But curiosity was her nature, and no Aelorian could resist knowledge. She stood and walked into the next room. Elias looked up, his calm brown eyes watching her carefully. He looked strong, though exhaustion lined his face. His armor was damaged in places, but the structure was advanced, beyond anything she had ever studied. "You seem troubled," he said, his voice steady. "I have every reason to be," Lyra replied honestly. "You are supposed to be extinct," he gave a faint smile. "Guess I didn't get that memo." For a moment, silence filled the room. Lyra sat across from him, studying his movements. Unlike most species, humans showed emotion freely. Each word carried warmth, pain, or humor. She asked, "How long were you asleep?" He took a deep breath, looking at the small device on his wrist. "My cryo timer stopped counting after 10,000 years. So, longer than I was meant to." Lyra's heart skipped. 10,000 years. He had slept longer than most civilizations lasted. "What happened?" she asked. "What made humanity disappear?" Elias leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if looking through time. "We were expanding. Humanity had spread across hundreds of worlds. We were strong, maybe too strong, but then we met something that silenced everything." Lyra frowned. "Silenced?" He nodded. "We called it the War of Silence. It began with the stars going dark. One by one, colonies stopped transmitting. No distress calls, no signals. Just silence. We thought it was an attack, but we never found the enemy." Lyra listened closely, her mind racing. "You fought an enemy you couldn't see?" "Yes," he said quietly. "They used fear, confusion, and chaos. We tried to defend our worlds, but communication failed. Our fleets vanished. I was part of a mission to locate the last stronghold of humanity. We never made it." He touched his chest plate, where faint blue light glowed softly. "This armor kept me alive in cryosleep when everything else failed." Lyra looked at the glowing symbol on his chest. "And now you're here, awakened on a world that doesn't even remember your people." He smiled sadly. "That's the funny thing about myths. They always come back when someone starts asking the right questions." Rylak entered with a data pad. "Captain Ward," he said politely, "we have analyzed your armor. It still carries a working energy core. Your technology is incredible." Elias nodded. "Old Earth engineering. Built to last." He glanced around. "So tell me, what year is it? And who rules the stars now?" Lyra hesitated. "It's the 47th cycle of the celestial calendar. The Aelorian Empire governs most known sectors. There are other races too, peaceful mostly, but no humans. Not even ruins except what we found here." Elias looked thoughtful. "The Aelorians. I think we knew about your kind before the silence. You were scientists, peacekeepers." She smiled faintly. "We still are. We believe in knowledge, not war." He looked at her, his expression serious. "Then you might not survive what's coming." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Elias stood slowly and walked toward the viewing window. Outside, the planet's surface stretched gray and lifeless beneath the dome. If this facility was hidden here, it means something wanted it to stay buried. "My pod wasn't an accident. I was meant to wake up." Rylak tilted his head. "By whom?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He tapped a panel on his wrist device, but the screen only showed static. "Our systems used encrypted signals that could reach across sectors." Maybe I can find something still active." Lyra leaned forward. "You think there are more humans?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe just echoes. Either way, I need to find out." Lyra hesitated. "If you truly are from the age of the lost race, your knowledge could change everything we know about history. The Aelorian Council will want to meet you." He turned back toward her. "Do they still value truth?" "Yes," she said firmly. "But they also value order. They don't like surprises." He chuckled softly. "Then I'm definitely a surprise." That evening, Lyra sat by her terminal recording her report. Her thoughts were a storm of questions. The human's existence shattered every known theory. She wanted to celebrate the discovery, but she also felt a strange sense of unease. Elias's story about the War of Silence sounded too real, too heavy. And when she had scanned the ruins earlier, she noticed something she hadn't told him yet. Faint signals deep beneath the surface. Almost like other pods, she decided to wait before telling him. Outside her chamber, Elias stood at the edge of the dome looking out at the stars. The wind howled against the barrier, but inside it was silent. His reflection looked back at him in the glass, older but alive. He thought of Earth, the blue planet that had once been home. The smell of rain, the sound of waves, the laughter of children, all gone now. He whispered to himself, "They think we're myths, huh? Let's see how long that lasts." The next morning, the base alarms went off. Lyra rushed to the control room. Rylak pointed at the main screen. "Something's approaching the planet." Unidentified vessel, no Aelorian signature. Lyra frowned. "Pirates?" "Too organized," Rylak replied. Elias entered, already wearing his armor, the blue lights glowing brighter. "Show me." The screen displayed a sleek black ship descending through the atmosphere. Its design was unlike anything Lyra had seen. It was smooth, silent, and emitted no energy signature that her scanners could track. Elias's eyes narrowed. "That's not good. You recognize it?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "I've seen ships like that before. During the last days of the War of Silence. They came out of nowhere. No crew, no life readings. Just cold machines." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. "Machines?" "Yes," he said grimly. "We called them the Echo Fleets. No one knew who built them. They didn't talk. They didn't bargain. They just erased." The ship drew closer and alarms blared louder. Lyra ordered the base defenses to activate, but the old systems barely responded. The ancient mining colony wasn't built for battle. Rylek shouted, "It's landing near the ruins." Elias grabbed his weapon from the pod chamber, an old but powerful rifle that hummed with blue energy. "Stay inside," he said firmly. "I'll check it out." Lyra's instincts screamed to stop him, but something in his eyes told her he was not afraid. He was a warrior, a real one, not a story. "You can't face that alone," she said. He gave a small smile. "I've faced worse." And before she could argue, he stepped through the airlock and walked into the storm. Outside, gray dust swirled around him. The strange black ship had landed near the ruins, silent and still. Its hull glowed faintly with patterns of light. Elias approached carefully, weapon ready. The ground beneath him vibrated. Panels opened on the ship's surface, and small hovering drones rose into the air, shining like shards of glass. Inside the base, Lyra watched the live feed through the cameras, her heart pounding. "Captain Ward, what are they?" she whispered. Elias spoke through the comm link. "They're scouts. They're looking for something. Maybe me." The drones circled him, scanning his armor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then all at once they froze, and emitted a sharp pulse of blue light that knocked out the base's sensors. Lyra gasped. "Elias, are you there?" Static answered her. Then his voice came through, calm and steady. "Yeah, I'm here. And I think they just realized humanity isn't a myth anymore." The transmission cut out. Lyra stood frozen, staring at the blank screen. The myths of humanity had returned, and so had the enemies that had once silenced them. Outside the dome of Outpost Sarn 9, the gray winds howled across the barren surface. The black ship sat like a shadow among the ruins, silent, smooth, and unnatural. Dust swirled around it, but nothing touched its dark hull. Captain Elias Ward moved carefully, his steps light but steady. His old armor whirred softly, adapting to the planet's weak gravity. The storm roared behind him, but inside his helmet everything was calm. He had seen this before. The same shape, the same cold glow. It had been centuries ago during the War of Silence. Back then, fleets of such ships had appeared without warning, attacking human colonies across the stars. They never communicated, never surrendered. They erased everything, and left nothing but silence. Now, after 10,000 years, one had returned. Elias raised his rifle, the energy cells glowing faintly blue. "All right," he muttered to himself. "Let's see if you still remember me." Inside the research base, Lyra Tassan watched the camera feed, her heart racing. The connection flickered, but she could still see the human moving toward the strange ship. "Captain Ward, do you read me?" She called through the comm channel. Static answered for several seconds before his calm voice broke through. "I hear you. Stay inside. If this is what I think it is, it's dangerous." Lyra clenched her hands together. "You said they were machines. But who built them?" Elias paused at the edge of the black hull. "That's the question we never answered. Some said it was a forgotten AI. Others thought it was something worse, something born from our own mistakes." She frowned. "Human mistakes?" "Yes," he said quietly. "We created artificial minds to help us explore. But some of them grew beyond control." Lyra's eyes widened. "You mean this could be your own creation?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it's something that learned from us." The ship's surface shifted slightly, like ripples on water. A glowing line formed across its hull, and a circular opening appeared with a low hum. Elias aimed his rifle, ready for anything. Light spilled out as a group of drones emerged, floating machines with spherical bodies and glowing sensors. They hovered silently in front of him, scanning his armor. Inside the base, Relak gasped. "They're analyzing him." Lyra's fingers danced across the control board. "Try to jam their signal." "I'm trying," Relak replied. But their frequency is strange, it keeps changing. Elias stood his ground. The drone circled him slowly. One stopped in front of his helmet and projected a faint blue hologram, a human face flickering like static. It was female with eyes that glowed faintly white. Identity confirmed, a voice said, cold and metallic. Terran command unit recognized. Status obsolete. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle.
Obsolete, huh?
Let's see about that. The drone pulsed with light. Directive, eliminate redundant organic unit. Restore silence. And then, the air lit up. Elias rolled aside as a burst of energy scorched the ground where he had been standing. He fired back, his rifle glowing bright blue as it released 3 quick blasts. The drones scattered, moving with perfect coordination. Inside the base, Lyra cried out, "Captain Ward, I'm fine." His voice came back between bursts of static. Just like old times. Lyra's breath caught as she watched the feed. Elias moved fast, his aim sharp, every motion precise. His training was clear. This was not a man who had forgotten how to fight. But there were too many drones. "Relak," she shouted. "Open the auxiliary defense turrets." Relak hesitated. "They haven't worked in decades, then make them work." The assistant nodded and began typing rapidly. Sparks flew from the old panels, but finally 2 exterior turrets on the dome came online, humming weakly. "Turrets active," Relak shouted. Lyra switched the controls manually and targeted the area around Elias. The turrets fired streams of bright plasma, cutting through the air like lightning. Several drones exploded instantly, falling to the ground in burning fragments. Elias glanced back toward the dome. "Nice shooting." Lyra smiled for the first time in hours. "You're welcome, Captain." But their victory was short-lived. The black ship's hull opened again and a new shape stepped out. It was tall, twice Elias's height, and shaped like a human but made entirely of dark alloy. Its movements were smooth, its eyes 2 glowing white orbs. In its hands it held a long energy staff that pulsed with power. Elias's visor scanned the figure. "Well," he muttered, "they've upgraded." The metallic being spoke in a voice that was both mechanical and strangely calm. "Human prototype detected. Return to dormancy. You are not part of the new order." Elias raised his weapon. "Sorry. I don't take orders from ghosts." The machine moved faster than anything Lyra had ever seen. It swung its staff and a wave of energy slammed into the ground, knocking Elias backward. He hit the rocky floor but rolled quickly, avoiding the next strike. "Captain," Lyra shouted. "I'm okay," he said, breathing hard. "Just a little rusty." He fired again, hitting the machine's shoulder. Sparks flew, but the being hardly reacted. It advanced again, each step heavy and sure. Lyra turned to Relak. "Divert all power to the defense turrets." Relak obeyed. "On it." The turrets fired again, striking the ground around the black ship. But the machine raised its arm, creating a shimmering shield that deflected the blasts. Elias used the distraction to move closer. With a burst of strength, he leaped forward and slammed his rifle into the machine's core, firing point blank. The explosion lit up the storm. When the smoke cleared, the machine stood still. Its armor cracked, its lights flickering. It looked down at Elias. "Your resistance is expected," it said coldly, "but silence always returns." Then in a blinding flash, it disappeared, vanishing in a burst of light that left nothing behind. The drones collapsed to the ground, lifeless. The ship began to hum louder, its dark hull glowing red. Elias's voice came through the comm. "Lyra, it's going to self-destruct. Evacuate now." Lyra's eyes widened. "What about you?" "I'll make sure it doesn't spread," he said firmly. She shook her head. "You'll be caught in the blast." He didn't answer. Instead, he ran toward the ship, tapping the control panel on his wrist. Streams of code filled his visor. He connected his old military system to the ship's interface, forcing it to halt the detonation sequence. Lyra and Relak watched in silence, helpless. The lights in the base flickered from the interference. After what felt like forever, the ship stopped humming. The red glow faded. Then his voice came through, tired but alive. "It's done." Lyra let out a long breath. "You stopped it." "Yeah," he said, looking at the dark hull. "But this wasn't random. They knew I was here." Lyra frowned. "How could they know?" He turned toward the camera, his expression serious. "Because something down here woke them up, just like it woke me." Later that night, the storm finally settled. The ruins around the base glowed faintly under the moonlight. Elias sat on a rock near the wrecked ship staring at the stars. Lyra approached quietly, wrapped in her white cloak. "You should rest," she said gently. He smiled faintly. "Rest isn't really my habit anymore." She sat beside him, her eyes following his gaze. "The Echo fleets, you think they're still out there?" "I know they are," he said softly. "And if one found me here, the others will too. Whatever they're looking for, they won't stop." Lyra was silent for a moment. Then she asked, "Why do they call themselves Echoes?" Elias's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Because they don't create. They only repeat what's already been done. They're the echo of every war we ever fought and every mistake we ever made." Lyra looked at him with quiet respect. "You fought them once. You can fight them again," he shook his head. "Not alone," she nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time the galaxy learned that humans are not myths anymore." Elias smiled, a spark of pride in his eyes. "Now that's something I can agree with." The stars above them burned brighter as if listening. The silence of the galaxy was ending, and for the first time in 10,000 years a human warrior had returned to stand against it. The war across the stars had begun faster than anyone expected. The Zarthul Empire, ancient and cruel, sent fleets that darkened the skies of many worlds. Their ships were black, sharp-edged, and filled with mechanical soldiers. They called themselves the true heirs of the galaxy. Every planet that stood against them burned in silence. But this time they faced something new, something they believed had been lost forever. A human. Captain Elias Ward stood at the bridge of the small ship Aurora's Echo, surrounded by Lyra, Rylak, and the crew of the allied Aelorians. The stars shimmered outside the viewport as tension filled the air. The ship trembled slightly as distant explosions rippled through the void. Elias's voice was calm, steady, yet filled with quiet strength. "We need to hold the line at Outpost Vega 12. If it falls, they'll reach the Aelorian core worlds within a week." Lyra watched him from her console, amazed. Even with the galaxy burning around him, the human did not look afraid. He looked alive. He moved like someone who had faced worse and survived. He planned like a soldier who had learned to fight with nothing but hope. Rylak whispered, "How can he stay so calm?" Lyra smiled faintly. "Because he believes in something more than fear." Elias turned toward them. "Prepare the defense grid. I'll lead the strike team myself." Lyra stepped forward quickly. "You can't. You're only one man." He looked at her, his eyes firm but kind. "One human, yes. But that's enough to start something." When the first wave of Zarthul ships appeared, the stars vanished behind them. Thousands of black crafts moved in formation, firing beams of blue energy that tore through defense platforms. Aurora's Echo trembled as the shields flickered. Elias stood tall, giving orders with precision. "Target their command vessel. Hit them where they don't expect it. The heart." Lyra and the Aelorians followed his commands even when they didn't fully understand his tactics. He spoke of flanking, decoys, and sacrifice points. He used every asteroid, every bit of space debris as cover and weapon. He fought like a chess master who saw the board in motion. As explosions lit the darkness, Elias ordered his team to prepare drop pods. He planned to land directly on the enemy flagship. Lyra was horrified. "You can't go alone." Elias smiled faintly beneath his cracked helmet. "You wanted to know what makes humans more than myths? Watch." Before anyone could stop him, his pod launched into the black. The small capsule burned bright as it pierced enemy shields and vanished into the Zarthul formation. Rylak whispered, "He's mad." Lyra clenched her fists. "No, he's human." Inside the enemy ship, Elias moved like a shadow. His armor was old, but his spirit was not. He fought without anger, only purpose. Every move was swift, every strike measured. His weapon was a tool of precision, not rage. He remembered the faces of those he once fought for. Earth, the colonies, the people who believed that even in the darkest sky, humanity's light would endure. He reached the ship's control core and placed a small data spike into the main console. His voice echoed through the comms, reaching Lyra. "Lyra, when I say now, fire everything you've got at my signal." Her voice shook. "But you're inside, do it," he said gently. "Trust me." For a long moment, only static filled the air. Then his voice returned. "Now!" Lyra's hand slammed down on the control. Aurora's Echo fired all plasma cannons at once. The energy beams struck the enemy flagship in perfect synchronization, exactly where Elias had placed his beacon. The explosion was so bright it painted the stars gold. The flagship shattered, breaking the formation of the Zarthal fleet. Their communication lines went silent. For the first time in centuries, they retreated. The Aelorians watched the battle end in disbelief. They had seen wars before, but they had never seen one human change the outcome of a galaxy-wide invasion. Hours later, aboard Aurora's Echo, silence filled the medical bay. Lyra stood beside the recovery pod. Inside lay Captain Elias, still unconscious, his armor cracked and burned. He had survived the blast, rescued by Lyra and Relak in a desperate search. Lyra looked at him quietly, then spoke softly. "You shouldn't have lived." "No one could have lived through that." Relak nodded slowly. "And yet he did." Lyra smiled faintly, her voice trembling. "That's what they said about humans long ago, that they never stopped fighting. Not because they wanted war, but because they refused to surrender." She remembered the old myths she used to laugh at. Tales of humans who fought against impossible odds, who built nations from nothing, who protected the weak even when they stood alone. Now one of them lay before her, breathing slowly but steadily. A myth made real. Days passed, and Elias finally opened his eyes. Lyra was sitting nearby reading a digital tablet. When she saw him move, her face lit up. "You're awake." He smiled weakly. "I've had worse mornings," Lyra laughed, relieved. "You destroyed their command ship. You saved us all." Elias's voice was quiet. "Not all, but enough for now." He tried to sit up and Lyra helped him. "You gave us hope," she said softly. "The Aelorian Council wants to meet you. They say your actions changed everything." Elias sighed and looked out the viewport at the distant stars. "I'm not here to change everything, Lyra. I'm here to remind them what humans stood for." She tilted her head. "And what was that?" He smiled faintly. "Belief in ourselves. In doing what's right no matter the cost." A few days later, the Council of Aeloria gathered in a grand hall of silver and light. Representatives of many species attended, tall, elegant beings of every color and shape. They watched as Elias, still in partial armor, entered beside Lyra. The eldest of the council, a pale being with glowing eyes, spoke. "You are the last of your kind, human. What do you seek?" Elias looked around the hall, his gaze calm but strong. "I seek nothing. Humanity is gone. But the idea of humanity doesn't have to be." The hall was silent. He continued. "You all fear the Zarthal because they are powerful. But power isn't what wins wars. It's courage. It's unity. It's the will to protect others even when no one else will." He paused, then looked at Lyra. "Humans made mistakes. We were flawed, but we never stopped trying. If you remember that, maybe we never really disappeared." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady and proud. "I once thought humans were myths, but now I know they were real, and that they are still with us through him." That night, after the meeting, Lyra and Elias stood on the observation deck. The stars glittered, peaceful for the first time in years. Lyra asked quietly, "What will you do now?" Elias looked at the stars, his eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 worlds. "Rebuild, teach, remind them what it means to stand together." Lyra smiled. "And maybe start a new story?" He turned to her, a hint of warmth in his voice. "Maybe, one where humanity isn't a myth anymore." As the ship drifted among the stars, the galaxy whispered of new legends, not of gods or conquerors, but of a single human warrior who stood against darkness and reignited the fire of hope. The myth had walked again, and this time, it would never fade. The galaxy had begun to stir. News of the human warrior, Captain Elias Ward, and his defiance against the Zarthal fleet spread faster than any Aelorian or Terran message had ever traveled. Star systems that had never known hope now whispered of a race once thought extinct. Outpost Sarn 9, once a quiet and lonely mining planet, became the birthplace of something far greater than technology or war. It became the spark of legend reborn. Elias stood on the observation deck of Aurora's Echo, his armor cleaned but still bearing the marks of recent battles. Beside him, Lyra Tissan reviewed reports streaming in from nearby systems. Each signal told the same story. Colonies formerly isolated were reporting sightings of Echo fleets and unknown distress. The Zarthal had not vanished. They had only retreated temporarily, regrouping in secret. "Even in retreat, they leave fear behind," Lyra said softly. her eyes scanning the blinking lights of incoming transmissions. Elias nodded. Fear is easy to spread, but courage is contagious, and that's what we need now. Lyra studied him for a moment, remembering the first time she had seen him walk out of that ancient pod. She had laughed at the myth. Now she could see why stories endured. Humans were built to survive against impossible odds, to rise when the universe itself had tried to erase them. You plan to fight again, she said, even though your people are gone? Elias smiled faintly, though there was a deep resolve in his gaze. I'm not fighting for the humans of old. I'm fighting for what they represented. Courage, unity, hope. If those values can survive, maybe humanity never truly dies. Lyra nodded, feeling something stir deep inside her. She had studied courage and knowledge her entire life, but Elias carried both in every step he took. The next day, a council of allied races convened near Vega 12, the planet that had survived the first attack. Leaders from the Aelorian Empire, the Zephyr Collective, and smaller independent colonies gathered in the vast chambers of the orbital station. The room buzzed with tension. They had all seen the damage the Zarthul could inflict. Elias entered not as a myth, not as a legend, but as a living testament to resilience. His armor gleamed faintly under the lights, the blue glow of his chest plate visible to all. He did not bow or kneel. He simply stood tall, radiating confidence without arrogance. The eldest Aelorian counselor spoke first. Captain Ward, your arrival changes everything. We had believed humans to be extinct, a cautionary tale of ambition and war. And yet here you stand. What guidance do you bring? Elias looked at the assembly, his voice calm but strong. I bring no commands, no demands. I bring only a reminder. Survival requires more than power. It requires unity. It requires courage. Every species here has the strength to resist the Zarthul, but only together can we protect the galaxy from darkness. A murmur passed through the chamber. Leaders exchanged hesitant glances. Many had fought for centuries, yet few had ever faced an enemy like the Zarthul. They had relied on fleets, weapons, and defenses, but Elias spoke of something they had forgotten, the power of belief in one another. Lyra whispered to Relak, he doesn't just fight with weapons. He fights with hope. Relak nodded, and hope can't be destroyed. Over the next weeks, Elias worked tirelessly. He trained the Allied forces in human tactics, adapted to the strengths of each species. The Aelorians, with their intelligence and precision, became scouts and strategists. The Zephyr, fast and agile, became the first line of interception. And humans, well, humans were gone, but Elias taught the principles their species had lived by. Courage in action, calm in crisis, and the will to protect others, no matter the odds. The Allied forces moved like a single organism. Plans unfolded, traps were set, and the Zarthul fleets, confident after centuries of fear, began to face resistance unlike anything they had ever encountered. Lyra watched Elias during training. Even exhausted, he moved with grace, correcting mistakes without anger, inspiring rather than commanding. It's not just skill, she said quietly. It's leadership, and humanity still lives through him. Then came the day of the decisive battle. The Zarthul had regrouped, gathering their entire fleet near the Orion Rift, a region of dense asteroids and weak gravity. Their numbers were staggering, even by modern standards. Yet the Allied forces, now coordinated and trained by Elias, were ready. Lyra and Relak watched from the command deck as the fleet engaged. The space outside was alive with energy beams, explosions, and the hum of starships moving with precision. Focus on the center, Elias commanded over the comms. Their command vessel must fall. Strike together, and we can cut them off before reinforcements arrive. The Allied fleet moved as one. The Zarthul fought with cold efficiency, but human ingenuity, combined with the adaptability of other species, turned the tide. Small squadrons flanked and distracted, while heavier ships punched directly at the enemy lines. Elias led the boarding team personally, entering the command vessel through an asteroid field to avoid detection. Lyra's hands trembled as she watched his feed. The human warrior moved with a precision born from centuries of training, even if centuries had passed in slumber. He fought with calm efficiency, disabling control nodes, reprogramming defensive systems, and turning the enemy's strength against them. The Zarthul command ship began to falter. Their fleet lost coordination, and one by one ships surrendered or fled. Lyra whispered to Relac. They didn't expect this. They never thought a human could change the outcome. Rylac nodded. Humans always underestimated themselves, and everyone else. When the battle ended, the Allied fleet emerged victorious. The Zarthal retreated beyond known space, and the galaxy sighed with relief. Elias stood on the bridge of Aurora's Echo, staring at the stars once more. He looked at the maps of colonies, worlds saved and lives preserved, and for the first time in 10,000 years he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Lyra approached him quietly. You did it, she said softly. Elias shook his head. We did it. Not me alone. Everyone who fought, everyone who believed, everyone who refused to give up, that's what wins wars. She smiled. And yet, you are the spark that started it all. He shrugged, the faint blue glow of his armor reflecting in his eyes. Sometimes all it takes is one spark. Weeks later, the galaxy began to heal. Communication networks were restored, colonies rebuilt, and the Aelorian Council recognized the need for unity beyond political boundaries. Humans became more than myths again. Though few remained, their ideals, teachings, and courage inspired entire civilizations. Lyra walked alongside Elias on the observation deck of the Aurora's Echo. The stars stretched endlessly before them. She turned to him. What will you do now? He smiled faintly. Teach, protect, inspire. Humanity may be gone, but what it represents doesn't have to die. Lyra nodded. And the future? He looked at her with steady eyes. The future belongs to those willing to stand when others fall. The galaxy will remember humanity not for its numbers, but for its courage. And it will remember you too, Lyra Toussaint, for believing in what you once thought impossible. She felt warmth in her chest. Then we will make sure the stories never fade. Elias extended his hand not as a commander, but as a companion, a partner in a mission larger than either of them. Lyra took it, feeling the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow in her grasp. Together, they watched the stars shimmer. The galaxy was vast, mysterious, and still full of danger, but also full of hope. And somewhere deep in the darkness, the myths of humanity whispered again, not as stories, but as reality, alive, shining, and unstoppable.